Welcome to the chaos sector. What you say can and will be used against you in a court of true crime law.
Mr. Get a Clue, is it?
Correct.
I want to first state that we all make mistakes in life. Sometimes we have a change of heart, a change of opinion, So it's normal to correct mistakes we make. With that being said, we're just going to get straight to the questions. Hopefully you can give us a bit of clarity.
Okay, I have no issues with that.
Did you state you wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty?
That's not what I meant. You're taking that out of context.
Excuse me. How are we taking it out of context? Did you state you wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty? What context should this be in? Did you want to prove he was guilty or not? It's a simple question.
That's a trick question. You're trying to create a narrative from that. I'm not answering that question.
So, you're not going to answer the question? We have the audio of you making that statement. Should we play it back for you? Let's refresh your memory for a moment.
I didn't approach this with a theory in mind when I identified this vehicle, and I told you in the video, if you watch the videos related to this, all of them, at the time I was having substantial doubt related to the potential innocence of the defendant at the time. Anybody will tell you at this time I was experiencing substantial doubt. They had to bring me back to center.
Now you state you had substantial doubt regarding the innocence of the defendant. So once you were, quote, brought back to center, you didn't have the same doubt? Can you explain what you meant here? Because it sounds like you were convinced by others that Kohberger was guilty, which prompted you to attempt to prove Kohberger was guilty.
You're misunderstanding. I was informed that a white vehicle spotted in the Linda Lane surveillance was Kohberger's Hyundai Elantra. People were claiming it was him circling the apartments, and I wanted to examine that surveillance to clear up the accusations. It wasn't to claim it was Kohberger. Stop trying to paint that picture.
The picture had already been painted. We're looking at it right now. You seem to be talking in circles here. Being brought back to center would mean you stand in a position of doubt. The center is taking a neutral position on an issue. And since this case is about an individual being charged with murders, a neutral position would be, well, you're not sure if he is guilty of those murders or not. But somehow you state that being brought back to center prompted you to prove that Kohberger was guilty. That's not being brought back to center, sir. That's leaning towards one side of the spectrum. But let's continue.
My fellow brain trust had to bring me back to center, help bring me back to center. And so when I was reviewing this at the time, I was actually reviewing it for, I want to, now prove this was the Elantra. And that was my goal in mind. I was going to prove it was the Elantra. This, is this his car really that's circling the neighborhood? So I was looking at it with the perspective of an Elantra in mind. And I'll be damned, I could not prove that it was an Elantra. And in fact, I proved that it was a Chrysler 300. So my mind was completely objective at the time. I couldn't have been more open-minded, and meaning I couldn't have been prejudiced in trying to prove the defendant innocent. It was the opposite for me. I wanted to prove him guilty at the time. And instead, I got the Chrysler 300 out of that. I don't think I could have been any more objective at that moment.
You weren't being objective because you wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty. This is subjective, in which you claim that others influenced you to prove Kohberger was there. You're stating that you spotted a Chrysler 300 in the surveillance, but this does not deviate from your initial objective of attempting to spot Kohberger's vehicle. So despite seeing the Chrysler 300, your objective was to prove Kohberger was guilty. Am I correct with that assessment?
No, you're completely wrong. I believe Kohberger is innocent. His vehicle was not there. I was only examining what was in the surveillance. You're taking that one statement, which was based on examining the surveillance, and creating a narrative that somehow I had a motive to prove Kohberger was guilty of murder. I never stated that. I've never once claimed this in any of my videos. So this is slander at this point.
Slander? Really? You wanted to prove Kohberger's vehicle was circling the apartments. But instead, you spotted an alleged Chrysler 300. Your intentions were to prove Kohberger's vehicle was there, though, despite everything else. In fact, you did spot Kohberger's vehicle, right?
The make and model and color, yes, but I couldn't tell if it was Kohberger's vehicle or not.
But you stated you wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty, based on this surveillance examination, though, right? So if you spotted a white Hyundai Elantra, which is the vehicle Kohberger had, and you were examining the surveillance to spot this vehicle and you spotted it, this is the visual evidence you needed to prove Kohberger was guilty. Let's not go around in circles.
Listen, if he was guilty, then that's the facts. I can't dispute the facts if it's physically there.
Okay, that's enough of the merry-go-round. It's not about if Koberger was guilty or not. It's about your intentions of wanting to prove he was guilty. Do you understand? If you wanted to prove Koberger was guilty, then this means you had implicit bias in your investigative work, correct?
No, that's not true. You're conflating everything. You're trying to make me look dishonest.
We're not trying to do anything. All I'm doing is asking you about your statements. I just want to go over a few, hiccups on your behalf, as it has raised an eyebrow or two. You stated that the vehicle spotted in surveillance was a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you know this by what the FBI expert identified, is that correct?
Well, not from the Linda Lane surveillance. They more than likely identified that model from the security camera. So yeah, it was a 2011 to 2013 model.
Okay. Did you attempt to contact Ann Taylor regarding this vehicle?
Yes, I wanted to inform her that the white Hyundai Elantra was an earlier model, not her client's 2015 model.
I understand. But can you differentiate between those models in the Linda Lane surveillance? Because the 2011 to 2013 model's window bank is the same as the 2015 model, correct?
Yeah, but the FBI expert identified an earlier model, so that's what Ann Taylor should inquire about.
But for the record, there isn't any other surveillance released that can be examined other than the Linda Lane surveillance, correct?
At this point, correct.
So how does that benefit the defendant? I mean, if you were to contact Ann Taylor and show her your evidential analysis of the Linda Lane surveillance, there is no distinction between the 2011 to 2013 model and her client's model. It wouldn't be of much use in proving her client was not physically there. So why would you assume that you could convince her that her client's vehicle wasn't physically spotted by that surveillance? In fact, it only hurts her client, as a white Hyundai Elantra is spotted during the time frame the murders had occurred. I mean, put yourself in Taylor's shoes. Someone contacts you and states that they have evidence that your client's vehicle was not the vehicle spotted in surveillance, yet it's the same make and model and color. You would scratch your head like, how the hell does that prove my client's vehicle wasn't there? That would only convince the judge and jury that it's the client's vehicle. It would benefit the prosecution, not the defense. Surely you realize this, right?
Never thought about that, really. I guess you're right. She would have to obtain the security camera's footage to prove it wasn't the defendant's vehicle.
You wouldn't happen to know why there was a screenshot of that security camera footage released, yet not the actual surveillance, would you?
Not sure why it hasn't been released. I'm not some private investigator. I'm just investigating the case like everyone else.
Understood. But you did attempt to contact Ann Taylor and even a private investigator. If you could examine the neighbor's security camera footage, with your vehicle knowledge, you could prove it was a 2011 to 2013 model, right?
Correct.
But why did the FBI expert change the year range from 2011 to 2013 to 2011 to 2016? Have you researched any updates to why this adjustment was made?
No. I'm not sure why they changed it, because the suspect's vehicle is in fact a 2011 to 2013 model.
I understand. But don't you find it strange that Koberger's vehicle was being tracked, which is a 2015 model? His vehicle was spotted on November 29th. Did the FBI expert identify the wrong model?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's possible, but they're experts at identifying vehicles. So, I can't really explain why that happened.
Interesting. In your examination of the Linda Lane surveillance, you ranged the vehicle from 2011 to 2020 in your evidential analysis, correct? Is there a reason you gave that range?
Sure. Based on the window bank of the Elantra, that year range has the same design. So just to cover every possible model, I ranged it from 2011 to 2020.
But you agreed with the FBI expert of a 2011 to 2013 model, right? So why would you expand it when the 2011 to 2013 model is the suspect's vehicle? I mean, isn't the 2011 to 13 range good enough? Why would you feel the need to, quote, cover every possible model if a model had already been identified, which you agreed with?
I'm just examining the surveillance and identifying the vehicle. A 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra was spotted. And that's all. What are you trying to say here?
I should ask you that question. What are you trying to say here? You stated that you believed the 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra was possibly destroyed.
I submit that this 2011-2013 no longer exists, or it's a burnt-out husk of a vehicle right now. I submit that I believe this vehicle at this point has been destroyed. And so now it's a matter of finding who owned that vehicle before it went mysteriously missing.
If so, wouldn't this have been spotted somewhere by someone, including authorities? Could you please elaborate on this claim?
It was just a thought. I can't prove that it was destroyed. I'm just assuming since it hasn't been found, maybe the vehicle was destroyed. I don't know.
It's the suspect's vehicle. If this vehicle was spotted by the FBI expert and you claim to spot this vehicle in the Linda Lane surveillance, surely it was tracked to somewhere. And even if it was so-called destroyed, authorities could track that vehicle to an owner. So why hasn't this person been tracked?
Why are you asking me that question? How could I know that? All I'm doing is sharing my thoughts on what could have happened. How the hell would I know what happened to the vehicle?
Well, out of all the possibilities, you suggested it was destroyed somehow. I mean, you didn't say that the vehicle fled the town and got lost somewhere in another state. Tend to think that would have been the first thought that came to mind. Why did you immediately assume the vehicle was destroyed? It's not easy to just dump a light bulb without witnesses seeing you destroy it. But then that's another issue. What do you mean by destroyed, actually? Set on fire. That would cause a scene for sure. Do you mean just left on the side of the road? The only white Hyundai Elantra we know of that was left abandoned was the one in Oregon. No other white Hyundai Elantra was, well, tracked and investigated. How do you destroy the vehicle without the authorities and the FBI finding out about it? Remember, this is the suspect's vehicle that the FBI expert identified in surveillance. Do you honestly believe that the suspect's vehicle, which was white, that stands out in surveillance, could somehow be lost by the FBI? Do you honestly believe that happened?
You're rambling on about nothing. Yet I agree, it's a mystery to where that vehicle ended up, but the person who was driving it is still out there somewhere. And that should be your concern. Who cares about the vehicle? It's gone.
Oh, I beg to differ. That vehicle is not gone because it never existed.
What the? So you're saying the FBI expert who identified the suspect's vehicle was lying? So whose white Hyundai Elantra was creeping in the Linda Lane surveillance? Can't answer that, can you? Yeah, okay. See, there's that wild speculating again. You just come up with all types of theories and then plaster it out as facts.
I think you may know more about whose white Hyundai Elantra was in the Linda Lane surveillance, but you're claiming the FBI expert is telling the truth about the vehicle they identified. Then how did they end up tracking a 2015 model? You can't answer that because it means the 2011 to 2013 model never existed. That's why it was never tracked down. Yep, that's a mystery indeed, I tell you. I don't know why this vehicle was tracked. Just save it, okay? You can't play the fool who doesn't have a clue. We know that the FBI tracked exactly who they intended on tracking. And since you have the year range of their so-called updated identification, there's a very odd coincidence here. And you did state you wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty.
You're out of control. I truly believe you've lost your mind. How about using all of that energy in tracking down the killers, since you call yourself an investigator? While you're wildly speculating, those victims are getting further away from the justice you claim to be fighting for. We don't need distractions. If you are fighting for those victims, why are you questioning me? You should be focused on the case. I mean, what the hell is going on here? Why are you targeting me? What have I done to you?
We've already investigated. Our investigation has determined Kohberger had been framed for those murders. The justice is not up to us, it is up to the courts. It's unfortunate, but that's how things play out. The reason we are questioning you is because based on your statements and your evidential analysis, we want to know if you were either involved with or associated with the parties that leaked the Linda Lane surveillance out. Now, the reason we have this suspicion, well, I can't recall anyone else literally saying they wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty. That's a very revealing statement and objective. Sure, there have been many who claimed Kohberger was guilty of the murders and even insulted him personally. But I can't recall someone stating they wanted to prove he was guilty and examined surveillance to do so. And this person joined 5 days before the murders occurred, yet uploaded their first video on the case around the same time the Linda Lane surveillance was leaked. My colleague feels, it gives off a lurking vibe. Investigators don't lurk. They do the work that needs to be done as soon as possible.
Lurking means you're snooping around. That's not a good sign. It's secretive, shady, suspicious. That is not what an investigator would ever do. And even if you don't consider yourself an investigator, you dedicated time to getting justice for those victims. So in essence, you're a true crime investigator while you're attempting to get that justice. We started out investigating with the optimistic mindset. A massacre was reported, we looked into it, and throughout our investigation, we collected many oddities, contradictions, inconsistencies that formed a conclusion. That conclusion hasn't changed. There aren't any contradictions in our analysis, sure mistakes, but not contradictions. And you have contradictions that are very suspicious on top of that. So this so-called time being wasted questioning you is important to the investigation. Because to be honest, I don't think it's a coincidence that you are here being questioned. You made a video responding to us, and it led to this very moment. It looks to me that this 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra magically transformed to a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, and you ranged the suspect's vehicle from 2011 to 2020 for no legitimate reason. There was never a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. It was all misdirection in preparing to frame Kohberger. Because you can't explain, nor can anyone else explain how the FBI ended up tracking a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra after changing the model range to 2011 to 2016. I'm going to reiterate, based on what you stated, these are the words that came out of your mouth. Quote, "I wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty," unquote. You cannot rationalize this statement. It means exactly what you stated. There is no misunderstanding, no misinterpretation. It's literally an objective you had.
It wasn't and isn't an objective. See, the problem you all are having is you're creating wild and outrageous speculations and theories without evidence to support anything. If you did, then you would understand this is about examining what's provided to you. No implicit bias, no witch hunt, none of what you're claiming I'm doing. Purely evidential analysis, which is objectively performed in my content. I have no reason to imply or even claim Kohberger is guilty of those murders. But if he is guilty, then so be it. It doesn't make or break me. I would just examine the evidence that prove that. So unless you have something concrete, you're basically wasting my time here.
A lot of words, but nothing holds weight, sir. You wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty. That is a statement that proves you had a motive in your so-called investigating. Let me put it this way, so you can understand, or, come to grips with the truth. In a pie graph based on your statements, wanting to prove Kohberger was guilty holds the most weight. You claiming the defendant's vehicle was not the vehicle in surveillance means nothing compared to wanting to prove Kohberger was guilty. You can't state, initially I wanted to prove Kohberger was guilty, then I discovered he was innocent. It doesn't work that way, buddy. Believing Kohberger may have been guilty, yet information or evidence discovered changing your view, is common. This is not your position. You wanted to prove he was guilty, so despite what information or evidence is discovered, your intentions remain the same. It doesn't matter what you tell your audience, it doesn't matter what you reveal in your so-called evidential analysis. Your objective was to prove Kohberger was guilty. And based on research, we discovered that you didn't make a video about the case until that Linda Lane surveillance had leaked out. If you were truly investigating this case, why did it take you almost a year before you started when you joined 5 days prior to the murders? What was your motivation to start when you did, if not during the time frame when the massacre was being reported nationwide? Why were you laying low during this time, sir?
Oh, so now I'm conspiring against Kohberger. Yeah, that's typical from you guys. No proof, just throwing out random and wild speculations and even slandering my name. How dare you? Who the fuck do you think you are? I don't have to explain anything to you. Who the fuck gave you all some authority to demand answers from anyone?
He's cracking.
I started investigating when I fucking wanted to start investigating. So
Wait, let's calm down a bit. I apologize. My colleague is a bit blunt. You claim you spotted a Ford Fusion in the surveillance, correct?
yes, so what? Why should I even entertain this nonsense? I don't have to answer to anyone.
You're absolutely right. You don't have to answer to anyone. But there are those who are wondering about your integrity.
Definitely some questions
let's put it that
from me.
way. So this is just to clear the air of some questions that are lingering around. We all know that the Moscow PD was driving an unmarked cruiser that night, which is also a Ford Fusion. You claim to identify a Ford Fusion at 4:07 a.m. circling the apartments. Are you suggesting it was the same unmarked cruiser spotted at 4:07 a.m.?
I can't know for sure. They had a call about someone stealing a sign, so I don't think it was the same vehicle. I mean, it's possible, but we can't just place Moscow PD in that surveillance without actual
this is
proof,
what I'm talking about.
you know.
You're right, but speculations come with the territory of investigating. It's simply a process of coming to the most logical theory. But what are the chances a Ford Fusion was spotted in that surveillance circling the apartments soon after the unmarked Ford Fusion was there around 3:15 a.m.? Isn't that a bit strange to you? By the way, did the FBI expert spot any of these vehicles from the security camera? Or was it just the white Hyundai Elantra? Don't recall the FBI expert identifying a white Chrysler 300, nor a light silver Ford Fusion, as you apparently identified. Surely those vehicles were also spotted, right?
You would do yourself a favor and ask the FBI that question. I can't tell you anything I don't know. Frankly, I do find that to be a bit odd, but this whole case is odd. There's always something weird, like them losing track of the suspect's vehicle, or Moscow PD omitting the year of the white Hyundai Elantra in the bolo. I mean, why would they do that?
Oh, give me a fucking... You're not fooling anyone. My colleague is only trying to be professional, but I don't have the patience to hold your hand through this. Take responsibility and stop shuffling your fucking feet all over the place. You claimed you spotted a Ford Fusion at 4:07 a.m. circling the apartments, and even stated it would have had to spot the suspect's vehicle coming into the neighborhood and leaving. Yet you know that claiming to identify a Ford Fusion is basically stating the unmarked cruiser, which was also a Ford fucking Fusion, was circling the apartments. And you know that this puts Moscow PD near the scene of the crime, around the time frame the murders had occurred. Now, why the fuck is this so hard to even suggest for you? Afraid to expose Moscow PD for knowing about those murders before sunrise? Then you're not truly investigating nor seeking justice for those victims. And that just magnifies your motive of trying to prove Koberger was guilty.
That's a sticky corner you're in.
Because you can identify a white Hyundai Elantra, claim it wasn't Koberger's, but wanted to prove Koberger was there and guilty? You're blabbering incoherently because you have something to hide. And whatever you're hiding landed you right here to be questioned. You stated you wanted to prove Koberger was guilty. You traced an outline of a white Hyundai Elantra in the Linda Lane surveillance, and you ranged the vehicle from 2011 to 2020, when there was no need to extend it to that year. Then they changed it to 2011 to 2016, which you made sure you covered this same year range, essentially proving what you wanted to prove from the beginning. The alleged suspect's vehicle you claim disappeared from the fucking face of the earth somehow, without the FBI, yes, the federal government, spotting this vehicle in surveillance. Monitoring its every move to and from that neighborhood somehow vanishes into thin air. And then they end up tracking a 2015 model belonging to Koberger, who you wanted to prove was guilty of murder by your own fucking admission. Your double talk and alluding to this or that goes in one ear and out the other with me. I'm not falling for any of it.
That's enough. You have really pissed me off now. First of all, you guys have no credibility to even question anyone else. Second, you have no facts. You don't know key details about the case, yet here you are, having the audacity to accuse someone of not being genuine. Your entire existence is false. You spread misinformation, claiming it's facts in the case. You're not investigators. I don't know what the hell you guys are, but it definitely doesn't classify as investigating.
Okay, we're putting this into perspective. That's all. If you believe Koberger is guilty, that's your opinion. Nobody has the right to criticize you for that. But see, it's stating you wanted to prove Koberger was guilty, yet also basically claiming he was never there that night.
The double talking.
And you've also alluded to the DNA being planted at the crime scene. So you're presenting two different opinions at the same time, and both can't be rectified by any information or evidence being discovered. Meaning, you can't have the intentions to prove Koberger is guilty, yet make videos alluding to the DNA being planted at the crime scene. You can't state that the suspect's vehicle was a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, but somehow this vehicle disappeared off the face of the earth. You can't take the FBI's word on this vehicle identification, because if that were the suspect, then Koberger wouldn't be sitting in the courtroom right now. There was a person driving that 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. The vehicle was spotted by the security camera. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because we haven't even linked Dylan's affidavit to any of this, and her description of the suspect. But the reports claim the suspect traveled down Walenta Drive upon their departure and through various roads, and was spotted by several cameras near the highway. You even stated that the reports have this vehicle spotted by the A&W restaurant surveillance camera. So they followed its path from the home, right? How did they lose the vehicle? Here's the thing. I don't want you to feel attacked, but we have to look into this. My colleague is basically saying there wasn't a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. That was a decoy vehicle reported to have been spotted so they could set up the frame against Koberger. There was a group of individuals who had framed him, and it was strategically executed behind closed doors. It was rooted in drug trafficking, and Koberger was the fall guy. There was no surveillance released of the 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra before Koberger was arrested, and there still hasn't been any surveillance showing either vehicle. It was the Linda Lane surveillance that you, and others had identified a white Hyundai Elantra from. This surveillance was never officially released. It was leaked out to the public. And the most important point to all of this is that surveillance was leaked, but the neighbor's security footage hasn't been. Only a screenshot. We deal with oddities a lot. And the oddity my colleague and I have noticed is the Linda Lane surveillance was the source of allegedly identifying a white Hyundai Elantra, which could have been used to claim Koberger was there, yet the neighbor's security footage would definitely prove it, right? Why hasn't this been released? We came to the conclusion it was never leaked or released because there wasn't a white Hyundai Elantra ever there, which makes the Linda Lane surveillance very suspicious. Now, we have to keep pointing out what you stated, as you have to accept what you said. You stated you wanted to prove Koberger was guilty. It's hard to give you the benefit of the doubt with that statement and motive. So that's where we stand.
Look in the mirror, why don't you? If it were up to you all, Koberger would be sentenced to the—
You're wrong, see? Those are two different dynamics. Let me break this down to you. Koberger has been accused of murder. He drove a white Hyundai Elantra. Surveillance is leaked out, and many assume, or even claim, that his vehicle was spotted circling the apartments. As an investigator, you don't examine this surveillance to prove he was there. You examine the surveillance to see if he was there. You understand the difference? If you want to prove he was there, then you are trying to prove he was guilty of murder. That is a motive, and an investigator should not have a motive. There's a difference in believing Koberger is guilty from a motive of trying to prove Koberger is guilty. It's your double talk that led to this predicament, magnifying your motive against Koberger. You claim the vehicle in surveillance is a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, which is not Koberger's. Yet, you wanted to prove Koberger was guilty by examining that same surveillance. So once you spotted the vehicle, somehow you identified a 2011 to 2013 model instead of the vehicle you intended on proving was there? And you can't say it was due to the FBI identifying that vehicle, because your intentions were to prove Koberger was physically there. They tracked a 2015 model, which was Koberger's, which you wanted to prove was physically there that night. And the 2011 to 2013 model, by your own words, somehow just vanished. I can come to the conclusion that, of course, you claimed it vanished after the 2015 model was tracked down and Koberger was arrested for the murders. Once again, you wanted to prove Koberger was guilty. It all aligns with the frame job. You're slithering around, and that was the red flag. It's your statements that created this problem. Mistakes are different from contradictions, and you have a few key contradictions. So we will give you the last words, but remember, our questions come from those contradictions. You are responsible for this.
Well, I have to admit, you broke me down to the core. It seems I have nothing to really rebuttal here. I'm actually not capable of thinking of anything to justify myself. Impressive. Here's the thing. Okay, I just wanted to be a part of something, a community. You know, I wanted to share my thoughts. I didn't want to do what I did, but they made me do it. Psych, are you fucking kidding me? You're just a bunch of useless worms. This is hilarious. All of that garbage you yapped about? Bring the facts, and then I will give you some credit. I mean, wow. This is the craziest shit ever. How do people even support this madness? It's like a group of imbeciles decided to create a YouTube channel just to see if they could communicate with real people. Ha, what nonsense. Take that loony bin somewhere else because you're tainting the true crime community with your madness. Not even sure how YouTube allows this channel to coexist with sane, intelligent human beings. It should be terminated immediately.